Back for another episode today. This is a live recording of Evolve with Dr. Tay, real conversations designed for autism parents. And this is my podcast. And today I just got to make sure let's see, is this actually streaming? Hold on, it's being a little slow. Things are coming online now. So we are currently on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So if you're watching from those platforms and an autism parent, we're going to be diving into a really special conversation today with Chelsea. And then if you're in the Evolve Facebook community, pending we have time, Chelsea does have a hard stop, which is totally fine, and I love it. But if we have time, we'll do a quick Q&A. And you are welcome to join the Evolve Facebook community at facebook.com/groups/evolve autism. So we're going to dive in. We won't be answering questions during this because this is the live recording. So, all right. So I think we are good to go. All right. All right, y'all. We're back again for another episode, and I'm just really excited to have another parent on this episode, on the podcast today, talking about their experiences. So, are you in the diagnosis process right now? And that process is really long and extended. Maybe, you're in the stages of first concerns, or maybe you're even post-diagnosis and you're saying, now what? And what we're going to talk today about is how this is an emotional process, and creating space for those emotions is super, super important. And we're just going to talk about it in a way to normalize these emotions, and also talk about how that healing process can start to begin and follows getting an autism diagnosis. So we have autism mom Chelsea Farmer sharing her story. I've had the honor and privilege in connecting with Chelsea through a mutual friend. And, I haven't known her through her whole autism journey, but in the short bit that I have, it's been beautiful to watch her grow and evolve through her son's diagnosis. She shares very openly on her social media. So we're going to discuss today some of her early concerns that you as a parent might be having too. We're going to walk through that diagnosis process. Often I hear parents asking, what do I expect? And not only in terms of logistics, but what do I expect in terms of how this is going to feel, what this is going to be like. And then we're going to talk about her healing and acceptance journey that followed. Chelsea is just one of these people that is so willing to share openly and remind others that they are not alone in this journey. And even before we pressed record, she was like, I wish I would have had a conversation, like this to listen to as I was going through it. And so she's going to give us the honor today in sharing her journey. And I'm just so blessed to have her here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick introduction. I'm Dr. Tay, a licensed child psychologist and parental mindset coach specializing in autism. I have supported hundreds of autistic children and their families and have been in the autism field for over a decade. I'm the host of Evolve, the podcast where we have real conversations that are designed for autism parents just like you. Each week, we will discuss topics that directly impact your life, from providing psychoeducation about autism and neurodiversity to talking about your personal growth, well-being, and evolution as a parent. We dive into it all. Just keep in mind, nothing shared on this podcast is clinical advice, and you should consult with a medical or mental health provider if you need support. Now let's get talking with Chelsea. So excited you're here, and thank you again for doing this.
Yes, thank you. So excited to be here as well.
Well, let's start off. I know some of the backstory, but for the listeners, tell us a little bit about your family and all of that.
Yep. So we like to refer to ourselves as the Farmer Zoo. So I have been married to my husband, Ian, now for almost 12 years. We live right outside of Seattle. We have two boys that are 13 months apart. Nolan, who is 7.5, diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and we have a couple other diagnoses as well. And then his little brother, Max, he is almost 6.5, and they are so opposite. What else?
Well, family dog, and I mention this because I see your dog on Instagram stories all the time.
Yes. Oh, Charlie. We actually, when the boys were both born, we had two Basset hounds. So those were kind of our our two babies before boys, but now we have Charlie, and he's actually sleeping right down beside my feet. So
Aw,
yes,
well,
we're not boring over here.
yeah, awesome. So, one of the things that I like to do is talk about language a little bit. So, how do you talk about autism in your household? Is this something Nolan is familiar with? And, like, yeah, walk us through that.
So I feel like we're just kind of entering that stage more so because Nolan, and maybe you can help me here. I don't even know like the proper medical terminology, but Nolan has words, and we actually just got approved for an AAC device to help
Oh,
empower him with his communicating.
yay.
Um, he has words, but he also has receptive and expressive language disorder. So that's a little bit different for him. And Max, now that he's becoming more aware and curious, like he's asking questions. So Nolan doesn't quite, I don't think he's starting to realize like, oh, I don't talk like the other kids, and I'm in a smaller classroom, and I push into gen ed sometimes. So it's interesting because Max has brought up the word autism recently, and I'm like, oh shit, excuse me, I believe in jolt words, but it's one of those things where like you think you're going to be prepared to talk to both Nolan and then obviously his sibling about it, because um it's not a bad thing, it's a different thing. And I'm going round and round because I just kind of take it as it comes. And Max knows that Nolan's brain is wired differently, and sometimes he has a hard time with emotions, and he doesn't always express how he feels through words, and that's okay. That's okay. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a really, it can be interesting to navigate. But one of the things that I'll point out is Max is absorbing, and Nolan is absorbing things too. So he's heard the word autism. And this is where one of my suggestions to parents is just start talking about it, because
Yeah,
they're hearing it anyway. And the more that we can kind of be the ones leading the conversation, helping
exactly.
them to build that awareness and that acceptance, then there's less questions, and it's more normalized in the family. And then also, as they're going out into the world as
Yep.
well. But I just want to emphasize this because I love how you described it, and it is spot on. The language I would recommend is that Nolan's brain thinks differently. And
Yeah.
one of the things you can say is, and that's what, and he has autism, and say, do you have any questions about that? And also letting Max lead that conversation for what he's ready to learn and take in. He doesn't need to understand why Nolan is
Yes.
diagnosed, and so I think asking those questions about what he's curious in, and then that open conversation helps to normalize it.
There was one, we went to a birthday party recently at like a Pump It Up place, and it was for a little girl in Nolan sensory class. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, what that means and whatnot. But Max was also included to come, and he made a comment to one of the dads. I heard him. He's like, he said, look, I have autism like my brother. And he started happy flapping. And so I think, again, it's okay to talk about those things. And one thing that I have to remind myself with Nolan too is, even though I can't have a full-on conversation with him, and he maybe doesn't have the word capacity or capability as Max, like he's not deaf. And like you said, he can hear and he absorbs. And we've also learned recently that you can ask him a question today, and he's just kind of looking there, and he'll answer it a week later without you even having to bring it up. So I think that that's an important thing that I want to note too, is don't underestimate their ability to listen and comprehend, even if you have the expressive and receptive and all of these diagnoses.
Oh, so good. And yeah, sometimes what we see is just that processing time,
Yes.
it's extended. but they're still absolutely processing. And so this is such an important point. And real quick, I do want to define, just in case parents are new to some of this language, what an
Yes.
AAC device is.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah, so it's
Mhm.
an augmentative and alternative communication device. And so what it's meant to do, it sometimes is on an iPad, but then sometimes is on a separate device. There's so many different versions, but it's meant to help, literally expressively communicate for the child. So you can press buttons and it will speak. And this is the thing, is like, it is absolutely a form of communication. And talking about neurodiversity on this podcast and all of that is like, we live in this neurotypical world, and we often can go to, wait, that's not how people communicate. And it's like, we just need to expand our acceptance of that. If that is the way your child communicates, like, how freaking beautiful that they're going to be able to finally get all the words in their head out to you. And yeah, so I just thought I'd kind of define that. So real quick, what has that journey of even getting an AAC device been like?
So it's brand new to us, and I encourage parents that are watching this, or caregivers, do a quick Google search, inform yourself about it, because it was something that I didn't learn about until just, probably 2 years ago. And then even then I'm like, oh, well, Nolan has words. Like, he probably doesn't need that. But here I was thinking like, oh, this might hinder him like this, but all studies show that it just gives him another form, like another way to communicate. And so when I asked about it with his school SLP at the beginning of this year, I got the runaround a bit. And so I just encourage you, if you are sent a 20-page questionnaire that paralyzes you, just know that's normal. And like Dr. Tay was saying, allow yourself a little bit of time to process, but also don't be afraid to push back and be like, hey, I'm having a little hard time with this, because with the AAC device, it's not an easy thing to get. And while some insurance covers it, you're kind of sent through some hoops, and it takes a lot of work and advocating, and you don't have to come in like a bulldog, but you got to advocate for your child and explain why you want them to have it. And so I got a little bit of runaround with the school. And so I'm like, I'm a doer. I'm like, I don't have time to like do this runaround. So what other resources can I leverage? Who else can help me with this, while they kind of figure out if they want to grant Nolan access to the school device? So I went to our pediatrician, and he's like, I don't know a whole lot about it. We just go to a general pediatric office. And he's like, I'm willing to help you. Like, let me know what you need me to write you script wise. And I'm like, okay. He's like, go to Seattle Children's. Like, let's make sure you have your reestablished care with the autism center. And so went there, and they kind of gave us the rundown. Like, here's probably how it's going to go. You're going to get contacted by this person and this person, and got immediate calls from like three people. And then they needed to do an SLP evaluation. And again, we're 4 years into our autism diagnosis journey now. And had this happened probably during year one, I probably would have thrown my hands up in the air, because I would have been overwhelmed. But feel like now that I'm like, okay, it's going to take a little bit more energy and effort. Like, that's okay. Yeah. So another evaluation and more paperwork. And again, I think that that's one thing for me as an autism mom or special needs mom, is like the paperwork and some of the questions that you're asked. And I know in recent paperwork that I've had to fill out, it's like, is your child, like, the words odd are in there, and like just like triggering words where you're like, shit, and it's hard, but at the end of the day, like, it is what it is. And so yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, but so that I'm still waiting on an eval call back from Seattle Children's Autism. It's probably been 3 weeks, so it's probably time for me to follow up with an email. And out of the blue, a few weeks ago, we get an email from Nolan's teacher, who Nolan's in the sensory program, public school, but receives special services. He's on an IEP, and his teacher this year, she's new. She's an autism mom as well. And her son's 18. He's a senior in high school now. And we get an email from her because I was like, hey, AAC, like, I really want this for him. Like, what can you help me do? So we get this email and she's like, hey, hey, farmers, I have Nolan's AAC device. Let me know when you want to set up a meeting with the representative from the district to get it set up. So, long story long, don't give up. Don't be paralyzed by the paperwork. Don't take like, oh, I don't know if this is a good fit. Like, if you feel in your gut that you know your child at least deserves a trial with something, or, you know, you just don't give up, because you never know who's in your corner kind of helping you behind the scenes without saying like, I'm helping you behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that was literally 3 weeks ago. We were just on midwinter break, and Nolan's pretty good on devices and he can spell pretty well. So I think he's going to pick up the hang of it really well, but it was pretty cool to be able to walk into the meeting where we're getting it set up. And again, I'm one who researches all the things and like, I want to be resourceful, and the lady, she was so sweet. She's like, how much do you know about AAC devices? And I was like, well, and she just commended us on like putting in the work on our end, so that when we got to that place, they don't expect you to know everything, but I feel like you're taken a little bit more seriously if you can speak to the things you're asking for factually and kind of take the emotion out of it, you know?
yeah.
So
But I think you made a really good point, though, is there are moments of paralysis. There are moments that are really hard,
yes.
or sometimes seeing these triggering words. Unfortunately, a lot of the questionnaires were developed many, many years ago and haven't caught up with neurodiversity and all of that. And it feels like scratching in an old wound sometime. And those emotions coming up are so normal. So I love how you balance that. That was the realness of this. And it's like, okay, process through that. And we're going to dive more into this, but process through that and then just be your kid's champion. I love you were saying doer, but I like you do not give up. And I will say over the last year of watching you, and I know this again has been a journey, but I feel like you've gotten even more confident in your ability to advocate, and it's been beautiful to watch. But if you're a parent that's new to this, just know like you might not feel comfortable right away, but it's a skill that can grow. So
and you really grow through what you're going through, and I'm sure someone is going to be able to relate to exactly what I'm about to say. But I'm type A. I'm a list person. I like to fix things. I like to problem solve. And, you know, when you get that autism diagnosis, you're like, okay, what's next? Like, what do we do next? How do we fix this? And I think that I've really grown as just a human in general. Like, it's humbled me. It's like, there's nothing to be fixed, you know, it's just empowering and making sure we have the resources and support to make sure Nolan's in an environment where he doesn't have to 100% always be in survival mode, but like he can be in thrive mode too. So, yeah,
so beautiful.
that's been hard for me. It's taken a long time, but we're getting there.
Yeah. So beautiful. So let's take a step back and rewind to the start of this journey. What were some of your early concerns and how did the diagnosis process start?
Autism was not on my radar. It was not on my radar. Nolan, again, the boys are 13 months apart. Back then, Ian traveled a ton. My husband, he's in corporate events. And so I was on my own a lot. My family lived in California. So I feel like I was always trying to keep myself busy. And I had this one brave friend who, like, to this day, I still thank her through and through. We'd meet up for play dates and she'd be like, how's it going with Nolan? Like, cause he didn't have words and he was nearing two and a half. And but he was happy, he was healthy, he slept good, we didn't have, eating problems. We didn't have a lot of, it was the words and the talking. And so we'd go to our regular checkup doctor's appointments, and my pediatrician, she obviously, we've probably educated her a lot on autism now, but we heard the like, boys develop later, he's happy, he's healthy, like it's fine, let's wait it out. And finally my friend, she was like, I think you might want to ask for a second opinion, like just get like a speech evaluation or something, and she was just trying to tread lightly. And so I remember going into that next appointment to our pediatrician, I was like, can we just go to a second opinion? Like something is just off. And she was like, I think he's okay. And I was like, no, I like really feel in my gut. I would just love like safe rather than sorry, cause again, I wanted to be proactive. And so, again, thinking like, oh, there might be something wrong with his voice box and so we get to the next step of the evaluation, and my husband didn't go with me and my mom went with me. And that's the first time I had ever heard the word autism.
So
And
the speech therapist brought autism up?
It was a whole team
Okay.
of people. So it was really, they were giving him like a developmentally delayed diagnosis, and like, here's what we're seeing, speech, OT, all of those things. And so they just said he also is showing, I don't know the terminology they used, but signs that point to autism. And we really encourage you to schedule a follow-up to get a full assessment. And I was like, what? I just came here to figure out why my child's not talking. And so I think Chelsea mom back then compared to now, it's like, we're so afraid of these like labels for our kids or these diagnoses. And, cause you don't want to single your child out, or you don't want to categorize them. But I wish someone back then would have said like, this is not a death sentence. This does not change your child. This truly just this empowers you. These diagnoses empower you to help set him up for success. And like I said, to thrive in his everyday life. And he wouldn't have been able to go to ABA therapy and get services and go to speech therapy, And so these were just things that I was so scared of the label that we almost didn't go to the diagnosis appointment.
Wow. Yeah. And I always say, that this diagnosis, one, the child that walks into that evaluation is the same identical child that walks out of that evaluation. You just maybe have more clarity of what's going on.
More information.
Yeah. And a diagnosis is literally a roadmap to know then, how to start supporting your child and expand your mind too, that brains do think differently. And different doesn't, again, you said it so beautifully earlier, doesn't mean that some fix is needed, but what supports are needed to be put into place. How can we educate ourselves? How can we, make sure too that we're noticing autistic children's communication and their ways of entering your world, because it doesn't fit our neurotypical standards, but those attempts and those desires are absolutely still there. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So really quick, I heard you say fear, because I just want to highlight some of the emotions. What else?
So scared.
Yeah. And what else came up for you when this eval team mentioned the word autism? And then talk us through a little bit of that process and getting yourself to actually go to the diagnostic evaluation appointment.
In addition to fear, again, just like very caught off guard. And again, this is 4.5, 5 years ago. And so, yes, social media on Instagram and sharing and people being influencers. And, my algorithm wasn't pushing autism stuff in my explore page,
Right.
And so, I just felt scared. I felt alone. I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders because as a mom, like you're not going to fail your child, And so, I wanted to go into fix it mode and I wanted to do everything that I could. And, I wish someone would have also said like, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. You're going to figure it out. You're going to be doing enough. Seasons are going to change. And so, I feel like I felt like I was so anxious to just like get the next thing checked off the list and what next? And now what do we do? And so we made the appointment with Seattle Children's Autism. And I called around to a couple other different places in the area and everyone had wait lists to get in. And it felt so defeating. It was so frustrating. So that just really fueled the fear and the like, I'm not doing enough as a parent. And by this time, since he had already received his developmentally delayed, do you call that a diagnosis,
Yeah.
I guess?
Yeah.
I learned that, so he had just turned 3. I learned that our school district had early intervention services. I had no idea about that program. And so even though we didn't have the autism diagnosis and kind of all of those answers, we were able to get him in to start serving his needs. And so again, I wouldn't have known that any of this was available. I had no idea. And it's really eye-opening to me, even to this day, 4 years later, where social media is so prominent with helping parents, just with all the things, how many moms still don't know those things exist? So I encourage you, like if you're on the wait list to get a diagnosis, or contact your school district. I believe in most, I know
All states.
It's
Yep.
like 3 years old and
Yep.
they'll bring you in for an evaluation and help you.
Yeah, it's based on the IDEA Act, which is a federal law that basically says that we have to meet the educational needs of all children. And so that transition point before 3, you're in usually what's called the Birth to 3 program, early intervention, and then you transition over to the school district at that point.
And I think we were a part of that before the 3-year mark, like 2 months of in-home therapy. It was like 1 hour a week where they're really trying to help you as the parent, learn how to play with your child and that sort of thing. So
absolutely. So walking into that appointment, this is a 2-parter. 1, did you think, like, were you like, I'm just waiting for them to tell me it's not autism, or had you come around? And then when you heard the word autism, what was that like for you?
So I think I should preface and just state the elephant in the room, kind of like I went to that appointment by myself as well. And I guess I still didn't really quite know what I was going to get from it. And I think I knew deep down, but it was one of those things where it's like, you don't want your child to have to like work extra harder, or, you don't want everything to be a challenge for them. And so walking into that appointment, it was like snowing in Seattle. It was like, maybe it's not safe to drive. Like I was still trying to figure out, and they called me 2 days before the appointment and was like, oh, we have a opening. And so I feel like it all happened so fast. Like, even though it took so long, it happened so fast too, that, I feel like I kind of blacked out when I heard like your child has autism. And I was handed this, like, what to do in the next 100 days.
Yeah.
This pamphlet.
Yeah.
And I got the diagnosis from a middle-aged Caucasian male who showed no emotion. And just painting the picture from what I experienced. Because I'm sure there are middle-aged Caucasian males that's our pediatrician, like love him dearly. But I just I was by myself with my son. I'd gotten the diagnosis and I got this pamphlet and it was just like so literal. And I remember coming home and like I didn't make it far from the couch for a couple days. I was just like, what just happened? What do I do now? Like I was so overwhelmed by what to do in the next 100 days. And I wish someone could have just said like, it's going to be okay. Like if you don't follow this step-by-step guide of what to do in the next 100 days, like that's okay. You do what's going to be best for not only your child, but like what's best for you too, because you're a part of this equation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my guess is this provider didn't warn you all the emotions that were going to come up with receiving the diagnosis.
Zero.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've talked with a lot of parents and their experience can really, really vary. And I just think, I want to say, you are going to have so many emotions in this process. And a lot of times, so when I'm doing diagnostic evaluations, I very much talk about that as part of the feedback session. If I am saying the word autism, we're going to talk about your processing, your emotions, the thoughts that are going to come up because you're human, right? And I say it can be analogous to the process of grief. And it's not that you've lost someone. You're not losing your child through this, but the stages of grief. There can be anger, there can be sadness, there can be denial, all of that. And what it is you had to shift your expectation. Every parent, when the baby is put in your arms, imagines what their life is going to be like. Like our brains just as humans do this. And then getting this diagnosis, you start to then be like, well, what if it's not like this? And that is part of the process. And so I just really, really want to emphasize that if your provider doesn't say that, this is so incredibly normal. And, I'll be honest, on my side of developing services, having my own private practice, I get to do what I want to do. And this is one of the reasons I actually do a full evaluation, diagnostic evaluation feedback. We walk through everything. We walk through recommendations. Then you're going to get the report. And as part of that report, I send a video message re-going over the recommendations because you're not taking anything in.
And that was another thing too. While Ian wasn't there in person, like obviously he wanted to know what was said and like, well, and I was like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't remember. I literally like blacked out.
Yeah.
Here's the paperwork.
Exactly. And that, again, it's like your brain is just trying to process all of this. And and I actually then have started adding in, and it's one of my favorite things I do, a 2-week follow-up after that diagnosis, being like, let's check in. How are you doing? What's coming up? Because you leave that appointment and the traditional medical model, you're done usually with your provider at that point. You have a million questions, or your case, I'm sure you went back to Ian, you're trying to communicate this and then he's asking all these questions. You're like, I have no freaking clue.
And I also feel like he was asking the questions to obviously get the factual data and like, what do we do? How can I help? And I'm just like, why are you questioning me? Like, and it just like, I took it very personally and kind like looking back, like it's important to go at it as a team. And while that may not always happen, just know that, and my husband is not the most emotional human either, but like, he has a different way of processing and I'm a verbal processor. I want to talk about it. I want to make a plan and that's not him. And so I didn't give him, I feel like that credit. I'm like, oh, you just don't want to be a part of this. And it wasn't that at all. And I feel like it hasn't been until just the last year where I took myself to therapy to kind of, really work to process everything that it's not okay for me to just plug full force ahead and be Nolan's advocate. Like Ian needs to be a part of at least like being invited to the doctor's appointments or being CC'd on the emails. And even if I am the primary person who helps us navigate it all, like I can't imagine how I would feel if I was just excluded because you don't show a lot of emotion. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an important point that if you have a partner in this process or even extended family members, everyone's going to process this in different ways. Different emotions are going to pop up at different times.
yeah,
And sometimes it's like, why aren't you feeling this? And the hard reality about autism is we do know that there is a really increased rate of divorce. It's as high as
yes.
85% because
And I
there's
know
so much.
why.
Yeah, there's so much stress. And also you're learning how to recommunicate. You're learning how to take this process and, parent together and all of that, plus then still find time for your relationship in this too.
I think I want to just touch on really briefly
Yeah.
to stress. I don't, I'm sure this will sit with someone too, but even if you're like, I don't feel stressed, like your body, your nervous system, um, it really gets impacted. And I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
This happens. Squirrel brain. I what were we talking about?
The stress of like,
Yeah.
that sometimes like your body feels it even if you don't, and just the
Yes.
impact.
Okay. So in addition to the diagnosis, and you start to like understand your child a little bit more, and maybe you join Tay's support group, or you find like an autism mom influencer that you start following on social media. Your stressors may be different than someone else's. And I talk about Nolan not having as many words, and but there was a point in time, and actually these behaviors are just resurfacing, but Nolan was an eloper. Nolan is an eloper. He had no sense of safety. And so there was a point in time where like the stress was like, he's going to get hit by a car. He's going to get hit by a bus. As when we send him to school, are they watching him close enough? Ian, when you take him out, are you holding his hand? And so I just acknowledge you. I just encourage you to be realistic about like, what is that stress and how serious is it? And while you can't control everything, like you have to do your best to keep yourself regulated, because my body stopped on me
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was so stressed out and worried about things that I just couldn't control.
Right. And then just because I feel like this is a important part of your story too, is during this journey, you also lost your mother too. So then stress, and grief went through the roof.
And I will say, and this is something again, 4-ish years later, I love to say like, autism isn't our life. It's a part of our life, but it's not our life. And sometimes it's more prominent than others, seasons, but it wasn't until my mom died where it like hit me dab in the face. Like you like live, breathe it, because you wanted what was best for Nolan, but like autism was my life. And then my mom died, and I'm like, we were missing therapy appointments. And I'm like, holy shit. So I encourage you to, again, stay realistic. Like autism is here from here on out, and figure out how, make sure it doesn't become your entire life. And again, I know that some situations are more stressful than others. And, but yeah, it takes a lot of discipline and therapy and
Yeah.
listening to professionals. And luckily and thankfully my therapist that I've had now for almost 2 years, that I finally went to after I lost my mom, because I'm like, my whole world has like come crashing down. How do I do this? And so she's just been really helpful with helping me navigate little things that pop up with Nolan. And she's really helped me uncover like, sometimes people are just providing you with information about maybe his day, just information. They're not asking you to fix things. They're not asking for this big long reply. Like, people are on your team too, and they're just communicating. And so
Yeah.
yeah, autism was my whole life. And it wasn't until my mom died where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
actually, it has to just be a part of my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it can become all consuming, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head is don't forget about yourself and your own journey, and you're going to have other stressors, and you went to therapy, and we've talked about this. Your therapist is amazing. So
Unbelievable.
yeah, she's so good. Sometimes it is hard to find someone
Yes.
that understands autism and understands your world. Chelsea just found this woman who was like a
Yeah.
beautiful blend of it all. But that's also, I will say, one of the reasons I started like my group coaching program is you deserve to feel seen, heard, and supported
Yes.
through this. And some of that process is getting answers about your kids. Like, the conversation Chelsea and I had at the beginning of this of like, how do you talk with, your other children about autism, for example, seeking advice, all of that, love doing that, but then let's provide some space for you to be human,
Yeah.
for you to go through these emotions. And I didn't get an opportunity to say this earlier, but you were describing it. I think two of the most common emotions we haven't named that I see are guilt and shame.
Oh yeah. Oh
Shame,
yeah.
I'm not doing enough, and then guilt, how can I be doing more? And those seem to be attached to this autism journey, but also giving yourself space to process those, to work through those, you're going to come out on the other side of that too.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the heavy emotions of this. Let's touch now, let's kind of shift to your healing journey and where things have evolved to today.
Oh goodness.
I know I'm asking you to summarize 4 years in like a few minutes, but
I mean, I've gone from the mom that, shared a post about her son getting a diagnosis and will he like be able to play baseball and like how will this look, to rolling with the punches and not overlooking the smaller wins, the being able to walk to the bus stop without, holding on tight to his hand. And I think that that's one thing that I just also want to remind you is it's really, really easy to overlook those wins, those small wins, and focus more on like what you're not doing enough of, or what you're not seeing enough improvements with, and all this energy and effort, like what's it for? And I feel like leaning into gratitude and treating Nolan as him and his journey, and like not getting distracted by like all these things, even Max, like you just have to remember like who this is truly about at the end of the day. And for Nolan, he's in first grade now, and in kindergarten, Gen Ed, he was kind of forgotten about, and he didn't have his own desk in his Gen Ed class. And I don't blame anyone now. In the moment of time, I'm like, I will stab some, not really, but
like what the
yeah,
hell?
Mama Bear wants to come out.
Yeah.
And now his first grade Gen Ed teacher, we've been like blessed with the best this year. She has a son that has Down syndrome. And so it's just, I feel like I'm a part of the team a little bit more, and I'm able to come in and just say, like, at the end of the day, we have the IEP and he's supposed to be pushing into here and there and all these minutes. And like, I just want him to be happy and thriving, and whatever that looks like today, if it's not in Gen Ed or if it is in PE, like, I just want to make sure that he's happy and healthy. And whereas before I'm just like, we got to do it. He deserves it. And it's like, he just loves what he loves,
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
putting my wants a little lower and being more realistic with truly what Nolan wants and needs.
Yeah. And those, we call them small wins, but they are huge wins. in your world, and but giving them the space, I think it's easy to be like, and sometimes too it's comparison with other same age kids, like, well, they can walk to the bus without holding our hand, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
that's huge. And like, I love. So Chelsea, we're gonna talk about a little bit at the end of this, her social media and what she
Oh,
shares. But one of the things, like, I love your daily bus walks. Like, I watch your stories all the time, and those are huge, huge moments. And I just also want to point out, as you were getting emotional, is the emotions are still really
oh
raw
yeah.
and real. And the goal is not to move forward from the emotions. You get better at learning how to cope and navigate them, and there's going to be seasons of life. But this is a really real part of this journey. And I just commend you. I mean, you really are good at letting them out and letting yourself feel. And I think that's been a huge part of your transformation as well.
Because when I didn't, and I was like chucking everything in the bucket, excuse my language, and like powering through, my body stopped working on me. And
Mm.
like, it's a real thing. If you don't allow things to flow and you don't process, and like, that will happen, and it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You saw the physical manifestations of emotional suppression, and just pushing everything down. And eventually the body does shut down.
And I've
That's,
had a couple breakthrough moments too, working through the emotions, and like, oh, that makes more sense now. Where like your body, like you feel like you ran a marathon. I've never ran a marathon, but like your body truly releases. And so, yeah, it's been a process for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So, Chelsea, I'd love to move to the social media side of things and touch on
Mhm.
that before we wrap up. But before we go there, anything, about this emotional journey, or anything on your heart that you want to make sure that you get to share and that other parents hear?
Yes, I would say, don't count anything out. Like I have a bracelet that I wear that says yet. And I love to abide by that, like the power of yet. Like Nolan doesn't conversate yet, And so just words are so powerful, our thoughts powerful, like those things become our reality, and what you focus on expands. And so I have found that the content I consume on social media, the autism moms that I interact with, it's impactful from A to Z, and it's good to get little bits from here and there, but it's okay if someone doesn't serve you or something doesn't serve you. If you join an autism mom community and you're like, I can't have this anymore, like there's going to be different groups and different people that you encounter along the journey that are going to serve a purpose and serve you and help you. And then there's going to be others that maybe they've served me, and they don't do it for you. So I encourage you to not get too wrapped up in, like, again, I'm a big social media person, and I've met some of my most best friends, autism moms, on social media, but I've also a lot have provided perspective about like how I don't want to have the victim mindset, and how
Mm.
autism is not going to keep us from vacations. And I work really hard, so when we go to Disneyland, we can fly first class because it's less stressful for everyone. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest things, just not giving up, and not thinking autism is going to keep you. Or Nolan's playing t-ball this year, like Nolan is
Yay!
going to play baseball,
Oh.
so is he going to love it? I don't know. Is he going to say oh shit out loud? Probably. Like, we're just going to roll with the punches, and if he ends up hating it, okay, at least we tried. But you
Yeah.
won't know unless you try.
Oh, so beautiful. I love that so much. And Yeah, find those people, find those things that serve you in this journey, and it's okay too if it serves you for a short period and then it doesn't anymore. But I love those words of advice so much. So perfect transition talking about social media, but also you said I work hard to be able to, provide the ability to fly first class. So let's talk about, before we wrap this up, you sharing on social media, sharing your life, but also sharing your autism journey. And then I'd also loved you to touch on, how you empower other women, but you have told me in the past you particularly love, empowering autism moms through their fitness and nutrition and all of that. So tell us about that.
So social media is so fun for me. I love to share. And I think that it's, while I come on to share my journey and what works for me, I also think it's reciprocated as well. It has connected me to people like Tay, other women who share tips and tricks here and there. And I think at the end of the day, it's been a big, a lot of people like to put a spin on how negative and time consuming and blah, 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 blah. And it's not, if you control what you consume. And so my mission is to help other women, particularly special needs moms. I'm not going to like beg people, but like, I want to encourage them that, yeah, this takes a little bit more, and mom life is hard, but like special needs mom life's fucking hard. It's going to take a little bit more, and your journey may look a little bit different, but it's possible. And with mindset shifts and treating every day as an opportunity, because if you forget about yourself and again, autism is like at the number one at all times, I promise you it's going to be harder than scheduling 15 minutes of time in the morning for yourself to like sit in quiet, or you know working out, and so I love to lean into my Instagram to show that my life is hard, and I don't like to use that hard word, but like, you get to choose to either be a victim or a victor, and nothing in this life that's great is easy. So like, pick your hard. So yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we could go off about the whole victim mindset versus victor mindset. Maybe I'll have to do an episode on that because it's so important. But what I love too is, you have made yourself a priority. You've made your own personal growth journey a priority in this, and then you empower other women to do that same thing. But working with special needs moms, it's not you from your high horse being like, you just got to carve out 30 minutes. Like,
No.
you know what this is like. You've lived the experience. So that means you know how to support other women in doing this.
I love the mantra, and I it hasn't always been this way, because grit and just power through, and like, you can do it, and sacrifice. And I love to encourage my women to operate with the power couple, grit and grace. And some days you're going to have to give yourself more grace, but also like, let's dig deep, because we do hard things, and we got to operate with grit, or yeah, grit and grace. You get
Yeah.
my gist there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll link Chelsea's Instagram account. Go connect with her, go follow. You can learn too more about the community that she has, where she is empowering women through personal development. Like I said, fitness, nutrition, and creating this space for you as a human, which is so important. And I think honestly, in this field of autism, not talked about enough, it's like, what do you do for your child? But I hope you are inspired today
Gosh, yes.
by Chelsea's story, that yes, it started there, but it's evolved to, you said it so well, autism isn't our world, it is part of our world. And that provides space for you too as a human, Chelsea. And I think that's so incredible.
Thank you. Yeah. And if you follow me and you have questions, or like, I'm here to like meet you where you're at, if it's AAC talk, or if it's like, oh my gosh, I lost my mom too, or like I didn't want on my social media what to expect. I don't just talk about autism because again, that's not my whole world. So I show real life, raw, authentic.
Yeah, it's funny. As I was doing the introduction today, I was like, do I refer to her as an autism mom? Because we've had this conversation, that it's not your entire identity. There's so many other facets of you. But it
And
is also part of your identity.
I know we're almost out of time, but I feel like I went through a little bit of a phase where autism talk doesn't always just roll off my tongue. And again, the whole kind of theme of this is like the emotions tied and attached to it. And it for a while, it was hard for me to really talk about autism. And so many other autism moms are like, you make such a difference. You make such an impact. Non-autism people, thank you for sharing. Now I understand the mom at the grocery store with the 8-year-old that's not just being a little asshole rolling on the ground. Like I understand what that could be. And I had encouragement where they're like, you need to just turn into an autism account. And I was like, I'm so flattered. But I can't do that because it's not my whole world.
Yep, space for you. Well, thank you so much for just
so fun,
incredible conversation. So that's a wrap for this week's episode of Evolve with Dr. Tay. Thank you for listening. So usually at the end of the episode, we do a Q&A. We don't have time, but here's the thing. It's okay, but listen.
I'm in the group, yes.
Chelsea is in the Evolve Facebook community. So if you have questions for her, feel free to come join facebook.com/groups/Evolve Autism, and she can respond. You also can connect with her on social media. So thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and disconnect everything now. And Chelsea, we'll wrap up real